This is the story of the girl in the hole, 3-year-old Lori Poland, who was sexually assaulted and thrown into a dark, filthy hole, where she was left to die after she was lured by a kidnapper into his car while she was playing happily in her front yard on a sunny day in 1983. How was she rescued by a miracle after 4 days? Let's find out. It was August 22, 1983, a warm and sunny day in Sheridan, Colorado. Lori Poland was a happy and playful 3-year-old girl who loved her family and friends. She was playing in her front yard with her 5-year-old brother, while her father Richard watched them from the window. He decided to get them some popsicles from the kitchen and left them for a few minutes. As he returned to the window, Lori was not there. He quickly came outside and saw Lori's pants lying on the curb. He realized his daughter was gone. Her mother was completely devastated.
Just bring her back and not hurt her, please.
Richard called the police, who arrived quickly. They issued an alert for Lori and the kidnapper and contacted the FBI. They interviewed the witnesses and searched the area. They hoped to find Lori alive and bring her home safely. But they knew they were racing against time, and the odds were not in their favor. In 1983, there were no Amber Alerts, no GPS tracking, no cell phones, and no social media. There were few resources and laws to prevent and respond to child abduction. Lori was one of the thousands of children who went missing every year, and many of them never came back. While the police and the community were looking for Lori, she was going through a nightmare. She had been taken by a man named Robert Paul Thirret, a 21-year-old college student who had a history of mental illness and sexual deviance. Thirret drove Lori to the forest and parked his car near an abandoned outhouse in a remote area of the Pike National Forest, about 40 miles from Sheridan. He carried Lori inside and threw her into a dark 15-foot deep pit after abusing her in various disturbing ways. Lori was terrified and confused. She did not understand what was happening or why the man had taken her. She did not know if anyone was looking for her or if she would ever see her family again. She was in a dark, cold, and filthy hole. She was in pain and in danger of infection and disease. She stayed there for 4 days without anything to eat or drink. Her feet were getting infected due to the chemicals at the bottom.
And he left me there. And he left me there to starve to death. He left me there for dead. That were in this toilet. Made it up into my pelvis. My legs were completely black all the way up to my upper thigh.
As Lori was enduring her ordeal in the pit, the community was rallying to find her. The news of her abduction spread quickly, and people were shocked and outraged. They wanted to help in any way they could. They joined the search parties and combed the streets and the woods. They distributed flyers and posted signs. The police and the FBI were also working tirelessly to solve the case. They discovered that Thirret was a troubled and disturbed young man who had been abused as a child and had fantasies of kidnapping and raping children. They realized that he was a dangerous and unpredictable criminal who could harm Lori or himself at any moment. They intensified their efforts and narrowed their search. They hoped to find Thirret and Lori alive. During their search, many neighbors gave useful tips, such as Paul Weavers, who eyewitnessed the incident, gave details about the kidnapper's car.
I saw an orange Datsun sedan with black letters and strips at the bottom. It was double parked in front of my house, and about 2 minutes later, I came out of my house and the children were coming down the street saying that Lori was in that car. As I left off, I noticed the first part of the license plate number was ADV, followed by 3 numbers.
Another witness, Michael Fisher, gave information regarding a previous encounter of the kidnapper with his children.
This came up a week before and said a man had followed them home from school and was trying to give them candy if they agreed to take their pants off. So I drove over to their school and I saw a man with shoulder-length hair and a beard. I got out of the car and said, "Hey you," and he took off running towards Bear Creek. I tried to follow him, but lost him after a while. He was about 5'8", 155 pounds, and his hair was dirty, like dishwater brown.
The clearest evidence about the car came from a grandmother, Juanita Zappa.
All odds, they struck gold when they bumped into Juanita Zappa, a grandmother living in an adjacent town.
I saw the TV report, and I recognized the car. I saw it parked in front of my daughter's house on Spotwood Street in Denver. The driver was bothering my granddaughter while she was playing outside in broad daylight. My son-in-law jotted down the license plate number and I reported it to the Littleton police a month ago. And just in case, I've written down the plate number here. ATV 627.
Fortunately, on August 26, 1983, a miracle happened. A couple of birdwatchers, Cynthia and Stephen Gollin, were driving through the Pike National Forest when they decided to stop at an outhouse for a break. They parked their car near the outhouse and walked towards it. As they approached, they heard a faint sound coming from the ground. It sounded like a child crying. They followed the sound and found Lori deep down the pit looking for someone to come save her. Cynthia and Stephen were shocked and horrified. They could not believe what they were seeing.
She was in the bottom of the privy hole.
And so eventually they looked down and they said, "What are you doing here?" And I told them that I lived there. And so for me, it was my new normal. Like I literally thought I lived in the bottom of a toilet.
They ran to their car and called the police. They reported what they had found and gave their location. The police arrived shortly with an ambulance. One of the police officers who arrived was Stephen Baker, a firefighter who had been helping with the search. He volunteered to go into the pit and get Lori out. He lowered himself into the pit and reached out to Lori. He lifted her up and secured her to the harness. Lori was rushed to the hospital where she received urgent medical attention. She was examined and treated. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and infected. She had a high fever and low blood pressure. She was in critical condition and needed surgery. Her parents became worried about her health. But miraculously, after some time, her health improved really fast, and she really came back to life. Her parents' encounter with her made everyone emotional. Tirette was arrested shortly after her rescue when he returned to the forest to check on her.
Oh, Lord. This is never going to happen again.
Lori was made to confirm about him by her pediatrician.
Rock solid in her identification. Her body language said, "Mommy, that's him," and she sort of reeled back. She was a little scared.
According to Threat's mother, Betty Ann, he was a good child but had some problems when he was younger.
My son is a good man now, but when he was a teenager he had some issues. The police once looked into an accusation of him inappropriately touching a young boy, but nothing was proven. I also found women's underwear in his room a few years ago, and he said it was a joke. I think this kind of behavior is common for teens, and it doesn't connect him to the Poland girl in any way. I never saw any signs of this kind of behavior from him, but maybe he has, like, a mental problem? I'm trying to think of something I did wrong in raising him that could have caused this. Something happened when he was very young, but I can barely remember. Maybe I failed him in some way, but I can't recall.
Tirette had initially been charged with attempted murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping. But after his wife provided an alibi for him, prosecutors struck a controversial plea deal to sentence him to 10 years in prison. But after that, he ended up spending only 6 years behind bars after his sentence was reduced for good behavior. Tirette is now living in San Pedro, California, as a registered sex offender. Lori's story did not end with the sentence either. She still had to live with the trauma and the pain of her abuse and neglect, and the challenges of her healing. She also had to cope with the fame and the attention of her story, and the expectations of her role. She decided to use her experience and her voice to help others. She also suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative identity disorder. She had to undergo years of therapy and medication. She had to rebuild her self-esteem and her trust. She dedicated her life to helping others who had been abused and neglected, or who had abused and neglected others. She became a licensed therapist and a certified trauma specialist. She founded the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, and End Can, a nonprofit organization that aims to raise awareness, provide education, and support research on the prevention and treatment of child abuse and neglect. She also became a speaker and a writer who shared her story and her message with the world. She became a source of inspiration and hope for millions of people. In conclusion, Lori's story is a disturbing but inspiring story of survival and advocacy. Do you think her abuser got the right punishment, or did she get justice? Because many people were dissatisfied with the sentence. Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more content.